welcome back to the Who's Right podcast, and we're back again. Some news this weekend, some big news, and before we get into it, subscribe to the channel, like this video. Let me know how you're feeling about what's going on in the market, how slow it is, and all that stuff. So yeah, subscribe, like, leave your comments. But let's get into it. Let's get into it right away. There's not a lot to talk about, but there's a lot to talk about, right? So the first thing that we're going to hit on is the Bregman contract, right? $35 million a year, 5 years, 175. I think this is a crazy contract. Obviously the Mets were never in on him, but to go 5 years, 175. What does this impact the Tucker market? Does this go into one of those things where it elevates what Tucker's going to get? Does the Bellinger news affect the Tucker market, right? So there's a lot going on, even though there's not a lot going on. Let's talk about the Bregman contract. Today it came out that he went to the Cubs and didn't go back to the Red Sox for $10 million. Red Sox had an offer out there for 5 years, 165, and he basically spurned the Red Sox and went to Chicago for $10 million more. I know this is a big hit for the Red Sox. Last year, they bring him in. They kind of hurt their relationships with Rafael Devers and eventually trade Devers because they think that they have Bregman probably long term. They always knew that he was going to opt out of his contract, but I think they were confident, and the reports today kind of tell you that they were confident that they were going to re-sign him this year, and that wasn't the case. They weren't going to. They didn't get a chance. They got a chance, but Bregman was going to grab every penny. Doesn't matter what the Red Sox was going to offer. If they didn't offer a penny more than the Cubs, he wasn't going back to the Red Sox. And that's a lesson that we need to learn when you hire Boris. It goes back to the Pete conversation. Pete was going to whoever gave him the most money. And that goes with every Boris client, because that's why you hire Boris. You're after every ounce, every single penny. And that's what Bregman got. How does this affect the market? Well, Bo Bichette's going to want more money, right? And, he's the younger player. Obviously, he's not the better defensive player, but he's a younger player. If we go back to Bregman and the Red Sox, if this was David Stearns, we'd be killing them right now. Losing Bregman and also losing the guy he replaced in Rafael Devers, because we would have traded him away. This is something that we'd have absolutely killed Stearns over. And just to show you that nobody's perfect, no GM is perfect. They all make mistakes, and this is the proof. Breslow wanted Bregman back. Didn't get him. He went to the Cubs. Cubs look like they're a strong team, and they're on paper they look pretty good. But at the end of the day, we'll see what happens, because it is a weak NL Central. The other news is Bellinger, right? So we got Cody Bellinger, or the Yankees, better put, the Yankees saying that they are out on Cody Bellinger, right? We're going to move on from the Bregman conversation, because at the end of the day, we weren't in on Bregman. And so I think what is interesting is the contract. As I'm watching the Chargers and and the Patriots game here, tied 3-3. But the interesting thing is the contract and how it's going to affect the rest of the market, right? You see a guy like Cody Bellinger wanting 7 years from the Yankees, and does this embolden him even more to want that? Does this say the Yankees are completely out, or is this just posturing from the Yankees on potentially signing a Cody Bellinger, right? So at the end of the day, we don't know because until Cody Bellinger signs, anything's up for grabs, right? Whether it's the Yankees still in there, the Blue Jays, right? There's 3 teams, 2 players, right? Who are those 3 teams? And I would say 4 teams because you got to always count the LA Dodgers in there, but they're only in it if it's a short-term deal. And so I'm not going to count them too much, but at the end of the day, we got to put them in the conversation. But there's 3 teams, 2 players. Cody Bellinger and Tucker. Those are the 2 players. The 3 teams, the Blue Jays, New York Mets, and New York Yankees. So what does this mean? What does this mean for the market? Right? I don't know if it directly affects the Tucker and Bellinger market because Bregman's an infielder and he's an outfielder, and it might. It might not, because at the end of the day, it's still to the willingness of those teams to give him the contract, and I don't know if they're willing to give him that contract. Also, are the Yankees actually out? So is it 2 teams, 2 players? That's the question, right? I still think that the Yankees are in if Bellinger comes back to them. They want Bellinger more than Tucker because of the versatility. They already got their right fielder in Judge, right? So they don't need a right fielder. But they might be looking to see if Bellinger gets the market that he's expecting, right? The Cubs are completely out. There is no way that they're looking for a Bellinger or a Tucker or anybody else because they got Bregman at $35 million. Right, they're even potentially looking to unload Horner. Reports are today that the Yankees looked in on Horner once the signing of Bregman happened, and so that's interesting, right? So does this mean? I don't know what it means for the Yankees. Obviously Horner's the better defensive player over Jazz Chisholm, but what does that mean to Jazz? Go back to third, probably, and so. But at the end of the day, this is a Mets podcast, and we want to talk about how it affects the Mets. And there's still so much uncertainty, right? Whether that is, are the Yankees completely out? Are the Mets gonna swoop in and get one of these players? Who knows? I'm hoping that we get one of these players. The question out there, at least in the Twitter spaces, in the X spaces, is that does Tucker want to go to Toronto? Valid question. At the end of the day, we can't answer that. Only Tucker can. But the question is, if that is a legitimate question for Tucker, do the Blue Jays look to go after Bellinger again? Obviously, they were in on going after him a couple years ago when he was free agent and he went to the Cubs. So do the Blue Jays open the door to talking to Bellinger now that the Yankees are out? Now that they know that the Yankees are out, and maybe go shorter term than they would for Tucker. Who knows? I think this opens the door for the Blue Jays to potentially fall back to a Plan B option with Tucker. With Bellinger. So where does that leave the Mets? Well, If the Blue Jays go after a guy like Tucker, I mean, again, I keep saying Tucker. If the Blue Jays go after a guy like Bellinger, well, what does that mean for the Tucker market, right? And I think that's so interesting because now that the Yankees have said that they're out on Bellinger, do the Blue Jays revisit? And does that lower actually Tucker's market instead of enhance it? Right? We actually there's a lot of moving pieces here. Because of the news with Bellinger and the Yankees heading towards an official divorce. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of moving parts here that we still don't know what the full picture is, and hopefully we get some clarity in the next week or so. Pitchers and catchers report in 3 weeks, and so. Hopefully there is some movement in the market, so we know what's going on. Obviously as fans, we want to know what our team is, right? We're the impatient ones. It's not the organizations, and maybe the players a little bit because they want to know where they're going to be living, right? But at the end of the day, the most impatient part of this are the fans, right? We're the most impatient part of this. Equation, right? And if you were on any of the Twitter Spaces, X Spaces, you know how impatient the Mets fan is. Obviously, this will change. Once the signings come, or will they grow more impatient or less impatient, right? Depending on if the Mets sign a player. But here's the thing. I think that that this changes things for Tucker. There was a report out there that was taken away, and now people don't see the information anymore by Robert Murray that the Mets had a 7-year contract out there for Tucker. At the end of the day, we don't know if that's true or not, but the question is, if that is true, do the Mets, and would you as a Mets fan raise the price on it? Would you go up to 9 years on Tucker? Some people say, well, if you're willing to go 7, why not go 9? And I mean, 2 years is a big deal. Obviously, it's a big deal. We just traded away Nimmo to get rid of 2 years of a contract for another guy that's aging. So are we saying that in 7 years we're willing to trade the Tucker contract for another player just to get rid of those last 2 years? Because all these contracts aren't going to age well, right? There's one thing to have a Soto on your books, but do we think Tucker's going to age just like a Soto? I don't know. The time will tell. He's a top 15 player, Tucker is. And so to have 3 top 15 players on your team wouldn't be a bad thing. I would love to see it. But I don't know if I would go up more than 7 years. I think 7 years would be my max. And the reason being is that if he starts showing a decline, it doesn't hurt as much at age 7 years from now, 36. So because he's about to be 29. So I'm willing to go 7 years, but I don't know if I'm willing to go 9 years for Tucker. Tucker's a great player, but at the end of the day, we just got and again, Tucker and Nimmer, 2 different players, but the contract concerns are still the same. We just got rid of the Nimmo contract to gain 2 years. So for those that say, well, 2 years don't matter, well, we just did it for Nimmo. We just gained 2 years. That's the whole reason why we traded Nimmo for Semien, is to gain 2 years of free agency. So I think to say that 2 years don't matter when it comes to a long-term contract, I think is foolish. because we just got done seeing that it does matter to David Stearns, and he's the one that's making the decisions, not us, right? So we need to really evaluate when we say, well, it doesn't matter for 2 years, because obviously for a guy like David Stearns, it does matter. So. And for me personally, I would only do a 7-year contract for Cody for Tucker. So where does that leave us if we don't get Tucker? Do we move on and go after Bellinger? I would say yes. I would say going after Bellinger would be the second option on that. But the question is, what would you give a Bellinger, right? If it's a 3-year, 4-year contract for Bellinger, are the Yankees actually really out on that? I don't think so. I think that's where they want him, right? The offer they have for him is what, 4 or 5-year contract, and so if it's a short-term contract, he's going to go back to the Yankees. So there is a real possibility that we don't end up with either of these two players. And the question is that a good thing or a bad thing? And so the question is, will we call this a failure if the Mets don't get either of those two players? And so, I appreciate the shout out in the chat about the sound quality being better. I kind of had to change mics, and so that's let's see. I'm glad it sounds better. I got a comment saying that they would sign Framber, and we're going to get to the pitching in a second, but. Just to finish my thought quickly on the Cody Bellinger, would you be upset? Let me know in the comments. Would you be upset if Bellinger's or Tucker doesn't become a Met? And I'd be a little disappointed, but I don't know if I'd be upset. Because at the end of the day, I think if it's a short-term contract, Bellinger's going back to the Yankees. And and Tucker's going to go after the most money, and so is that the Mets because he doesn't want to go to the Blue Jays? Bo Bichette is having an interview with the Phillies, but I think that market is going to be either the Phillies or the Red Sox. I don't think the Blue Jays are in on that, especially after getting Okamoto. So I think for the Blue Jays, it's Tucker or bust right now, and the only question is does he want to play in Canada? That's really the only question with Tucker. And if they go to their Plan B option and go after a Bellinger, now that they think that the Yankees are out, does Tucker want to come? Will that open the door for Tucker coming to the Mets? I hope so. And I hope we get an answer this week. But for me, I'd leave it at 7 years. 7 years is the most that I would do it, and that'll put him in line with 1 year longer than Lindor at this point, right? I think Lindor has 6 years left on his contract. So you have him for 1 more year than Lindor. So I'm all for that. And then if we get Tucker, we can let Benj at the bottom of the lineup figure it out and have him start on opening day for the team at center field. And right when Benj is ready to move to a corner outfield is when the Tucker contract comes off the books. So I think 7 years is a sweet spot for a guy like Tucker. So let's hope we get an answer on this. Let's hope we get something going this week because we're all eager to see what's happening. Now let's go on to the pitching market. There's an article, I think by The Athletic, that put the Mets as the front runner for Freddie Peralta. And I would love to see this trade. Um, you know, we have a system that has a few players that we probably could let go of just because we're a little top heavy in the system, right? Obviously, we're not going to just let go of guys for nothing, but Freddie Peralta would be an excellent piece, especially if we get the chance to sign him to a long-term deal once he gets here, which I think Freddie, more than anybody else, would be more than Scooble would be willing to do that. I would love to see the trade happen. I'm not going to sit here and talk about prospects because we don't know what Milwaukee likes. We can sit here and say we can let go of a Wettinger or Jet Williams or Will Watson. We could say all the names in the book, right? But at the end of the day, we don't know what Milwaukee likes. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you what I'm willing to give up because usually when it comes to fans, we think we give up more than the actual trade in more cases than not, right? And so I'm not going to sit here and talk about what we're going to give up, but I would love to see this trade. This is a guy, top of the rotation guy, that would solidify our pitching rotation because he'll give us an arm that is that you can rely on, right? He's a quality arm that you can rely on, not this back and forth whether it's a good year or a bad year from Naya or another year that we don't know about with Senga. Obviously he's the top of the rotation, but at the end of the day, we don't know what kind of package is there for Peralta. But get it done. Get it done. The other question is, now that the arbitration is done for Scooble, do the Mets actually open that door for trade, right? The Scooble arbitration number, Boris put out there $30 million for a pitcher, and the Tigers put on $19 million. They're ways apart. And if Scooble wins the arbitration hearing, does that open the door for the Mets to sign him now, right? Or to trade for him. Not to sign him, to trade for him. Why? I was listening to a podcast last week, Locked On Mets podcast, and Ryan Finkelstein was talking about how that number in January might change how people feel about trading for Scooble. Right, that kind of shortens the amount of teams that will go after Scooble, right, because of that big contract. So the question is, and it's not going to cost as much with the prospects wise because of the amount that's on his contract. So the question is, do we go after a Scooble now that the arbitration number, or is he a guy that we still wait until he becomes a free agent because nobody's going to go after him at this point? I would open the door. I would knock on the Tigers' door and see if that's still an option, and see if it doesn't cost prospect wise too much. If it's lower end prospects because of the fact that $30 million is too much for most teams, I would love the Mets to go after him, as long as it's lower level prospects, right? So there we are. And now let's talk about Framber. I don't think the Mets are in on Framber. I don't think he's a guy, in my opinion, and this is me thinking what David Stearns might be thinking, not what I'm thinking, but what David Stearns might be thinking. I'll tell you what I'm thinking a little bit, but I'm thinking what David Stearns is thinking. I don't think Framber is a guy that David Stearns is willing to give up a draft pick for. I just don't. I don't think that he's a guy that is good enough to give up a draft pick for. Um, that for David Stearns, draft picks are valuable, and I don't think he'll give up that draft pick for a guy like Framber. At this point, I even see Framber going back to the Astros for 1 year, come back on the market next year. Even though it's going to be a pitching heavy market next year, come back on the market next year and with no qualifying offer. I think that for him and for Gallen in Phoenix, I think both of those guys are going back to their teams for at least 1 year. Whether they make it a multi-year deal with an opt-out, but I think both of those teams are going back to their team. I don't think anybody else is going to go after those guys. And so I think that we'll see what happens with Framber and Zach Gallen, but I think both of those guys are going back to their teams for 1 year deals to reset their markets for next year so that they can hit the market without qualifying offers. Okay, what I think about Framber, honestly, I don't know. I have Framber on my fantasy team, but after seeing that cross up with the catcher, I have my doubts. Is he a guy that after listening to everything going on about the clubhouse, is he a guy that we want in the clubhouse? I don't know. Obviously, you always get second chances, or at least you should get second chances to redeem yourself. And the question is that the case? Or is Framber just that guy? We don't know. Obviously, that's up to David Stearns to do all the due diligence to make sure that it was just a one-time thing and Framber isn't that guy. But at the end of the day, whether I have my reservations or not, I don't think David Stearns is going to sign Framber because of the draft pick. Whether we agree with it or not, time will tell. Time will prove us or David Stearns wrong. But at the end of the day, I don't see him in a Mets uniform. People were talking about Ranger Suarez as well. And again, I lump all those guys in the same boat. I don't think David Stearns is giving up a draft pick for one of these guys. There's I don't think that they feel like they're worth it. But we'll see. We'll see. At the end of the day, we'll see. But I do think that we are getting a pitcher, whether most likely, hopefully, it's Peralta. Obviously, just like everybody else, I would rather have Skubal because he is the second best pitcher in baseball. I still give the best pitcher in baseball to Paul Skeens. And so, but he's one of the top two. And so I would rather have Skubal. But I think Peralta not only is a good top of the rotation arm, but doesn't cost us much, right? $8 million. I don't even think he'll cost as much as Skubal will next year. And I, just like everybody else, do believe that Nolan McLean is going to be the future ace of this ball club. So, and Peralta can hold it down until Nolan McLean is ready. So, that's what I got for you guys today. I think we're going to get Peralta. I am 50-50 on if we are getting Tucker or not, and 30% confident in the Bellinger, because I still think the Yankees will come back and open the doors again if he comes back down a little bit from the price that he's asking for. But before I get out of here, subscribe to the channel, like this video, let me know how you're thinking on replay, and let's see what happens this week. Movement is happening. It might be slow, and it might even be one player a week at this point. I don't know. Or one player every couple of days at this point. But at least we have a guy in Bregman that's signed, so that eliminates a domino off the board. And so we're going to see some movement this week, whether it's Bo Bichette or Tucker. One of those guys is going to sign this week, or both. Both might sign this week. And I think you're going to start seeing some trades happening to better the ball club, i.e. the Peralta trade, which I think that's going to be the next trade that we're going to be doing. And hopefully that comes to fruition. Let's make it happen. But like this video, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, guys, let's go Mets. I wasn't ready. Yeah.